Human interaction can be difficult sometimes. It can be awkward and messy. You can say the wrong thing, you can have a bad reaction, or you can do something so terribly cringy that it haunts you every night at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. Well, now imagine that being recorded and watched by millions of people for years afterward. These are some interviews that went terribly wrong. James Brown, a musical innovator and electrifying stage presence, wrestled with personal demons throughout his life. But even as acclaimed as he was for his musical genius, his private life was full of turmoil. According to his daughter, Yama Brown, her father used to beat his wife, and NPR reports that she had a violent father and a really unstable home life. He spent time in prison and had a lot of illegitimate children he had no interest in taking care of, and a drug addiction. Also, they shed light on Brown's difficult upbringing, marked by a violent father. As reported by Far Out magazine, these issues converged in a dramatic incident in 1988. Brown was arrested for assaulting his wife with a metal pipe and discharging a firearm at her. Speculation suggests Brown was battling PCP addiction at this time. This drug, also known as angel dust, is notorious for inducing neurotic behavior. The exact unpredictable behavior Brown had in an interview with CNN in April of that year.
Well, that's the second time we've heard that in 2 days. That's very interesting. Now, don't leave us, James. You stay right there.
Esquire magazine suggests Brown was likely under the influence during the interview. He launches in impromptu songs and goes into detail about his abilities. The interview's notoriety is such that comedian Jordan Pele recreated it without changing almost anything in 2016. Another artist that seemed to be high in the clouds during the interview is Iggy Pop. Interviewer Ian Molly Meldrum is quite a legend in Australia, and his music show Countdown is part of the legacy. But in 1979, Iggy Pop was booked for an interview on Meldrum's show that was meant to promote his new album, On Board, which descended into glorious chaos. From the get-go, Pop threw Meldrum's planned interview off track. A loud "Hiya, dogface" erupted from Pop, who proceeded to jump around, make nonsensical noises, and even a cheeky attempt at the "something on your shirt" gag, interrupting Meldrum's introduction.
Live in concert? What's wrong? Don't you set me up, you behave yourself.
Pop's responses to Meldrum's questions were non-existent, not even trying to hide his disinterest. The performance was as absurd as the interview. He didn't even try to lip sync. Pop barely acknowledged the music, showing disdain for the entire experience. While many suspected Iggy was under the influence, ABC's Double J sheds light on a different story. Pop claims his erratic behavior was a combination of jet lag and a perceived betrayal by his record label. Exhausted from travel, he was informed upon arrival that a live performance he was excited about was off the table, which angered him. He recalls saying to himself, "Don't let yourself take this guy seriously," during Meldrum's attempt at interviewing him. He definitely accomplished his mission. However, even though Iggy wasn't high during the interview, there's an artist that really was under the influence during a TV interview, resulting in an awkward interaction between him and the host. Scott Stapp, after the peak of his career after leaving Creed, and went on an interview in Casino Cinema to promote some of his solo work. The issue was that he was extremely drunk in the morning, and right off the bat, just from the introduction, you could tell that the interview was going to go south real fast. The host was an actor on The Sopranos, and the other person in the show was Howard Stern's wife. The introduction, you could see Scott's erratic behavior by the way he shook the host's hand and then proceeded to take Howard Stern's wife by the back of the head and gave her an aggressive kiss on the cheek. During the interview, he was talking nonsense and even offended the host and Beth Stern.
You know, Beth, how are you, man? Good to see you.
We met.
We kissed.
Still, even when he was acting so unpredictable and unhinged, the host and Beth were laughing the whole time. He even yelled and started rambling about his former bandmates being bitter and started questioning Beth Stern about not having bitter ex-boyfriends. Then it got even more chaotic when the host was trying to tell the audience to stay tuned while Scott was yelling nonsense and weird noises. The musician has been battling alcohol addiction for years now, being on and off of sobriety, and still is one of the best-selling singers in American history. However, there's people that don't need any substance to say the wrong thing. The Beatles attained a level of fame so many can only dream about, but the downsides of fame is that you have to be strictly careful about what you say, and that reality hit the band in 1966. A series of interviews published in the London Evening Standard, reported by Slate, featured John Lennon letting out an infamous quote, "We're more popular than Jesus now. I don't know what comes first, rock and roll or Christianity." Rolling Stones points out that Lennon's remark was swept under the table for weeks. However, a few months later, a magazine called Datebook took the Christianity comment and used it on its cover, bringing attention to it and igniting controversy. It inspired protests. Beatles merchandise and records were destroyed, and death threats were thrown at the band. The Beatles attempted to do damage control at a press conference where John, visibly shaken, tried to explain his comment. He claimed his words were a commentary on organized religion, not a self-aggrandizing comparison about the Beatles being greater than Jesus. Nevertheless, Lennon wasn't the only one uttering controversial statements. Slate reveals a series of offensive remarks by the entire band. Paul McCartney labeled the U.S. a lousy country and used a racial slur. Ringo Starr referred to his younger wife as property. John, once again, displayed prejudice with xenophobic remarks about ugly people being foreign. Luckily for them, Lennon's comment about Jesus overshadowed the band's other offensive statements. But let's take the heat off the artist by exploring the times where the interviewer f***s up the interaction by not knowing anything about the person in front of them. Weezer's frontman, Rivers Cuomo, had an interview during the MTV festival Bazaar in 1996. The name of the festival is the best way to describe this interview that took place inside a van. For starters, the interviewer didn't even know the name of the vocalist, so she tried to fake it by calling him Rivers Weezer, which of course made the musician visibly uncomfortable and confused. But it just got worse and worse, because everyone could see that Como didn't want to be there as he responded to every question with so much disdain and indifference. They even had to cut so much footage of Como staring into the distance, but they didn't cut enough since there's still so much silence between each question and the awkwardness is palpable. Yikes. It's even a miracle that that interview didn't get deleted completely. However, there's maybe even a more awkward interview that's also from MTV. The TV network occasionally used to make musicians step in another musician's interview to get extra eyes on. This strategy usually went well. Usually. In an interview in 1994 at Lollapalooza, Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins had to interview Nick Cave, which didn't hold back at all. With just the first questions, Nick was already annoyed. Billy asked him how he got involved with Lollapalooza, at which Nick responded with boredom that his manager rang him up and told him he was going to perform. He then proceeded to ask Billy if those were his questions because he had already done that interview before. So, Nick didn't like to respond to the same questions that Billy was literally reading off of a sheet, since it can really make the conversation seem less organic and fluid. But things got even more awkward when Billy tried to joke about other countries being exactly the same except for the United States. Something you shouldn't joke about with someone who's not from the United States. Even though Billy tried to apologize for his joke and salvage the situation.
You know, I'm not a teenager. No, I'm saying the mentality.
You have the mentality of a teenager.
Absolutely.
Nick told him he had the mentality of a teenager, which made Billy fumble around while he tried again to fix his mistake. Nevertheless, this interview combined two stars on purpose in hopes of getting more views, and still, it went wrong. Now imagine how bad it can go when this happens unintentionally. In 1995, Madonna reigned supreme as a global pop icon. Meanwhile, Courtney Love, fresh off the success of Hole's sophomore album, Live Through This, had become a formidable force in rock music. But when MTV's Kurt Lauder attempted a post-MVA's interview with Madonna, things took a turn for the bizarre. Louder barely gets started before the interview crumbles. A drunken Courtney starts throwing things at Madonna, prompting her to say Courtney Love seems desperate for attention right now. Louder extends an invitation to love, which inspires fear and alarm from Madonna. Courtney then embarks on a rambling, drunken monologue, seemingly sucking the life out of Madonna. According to Far Out magazine, Love accused Madonna of being rude to her in the past. This, in Love's mind, justifies interrupting Madonna's promotional interview. Needless to say, Madonna doesn't buy it. Before a mindless conversation about shoes, Love drops to her knees, drunkenly confessing that she and her late husband Kurt Cobain were fans of Madonna's documentary, Truth or Dare. This bizarre declaration freaks out Madonna as she signals to her team that she's done.
I went to Truth or Dare with Kurt, and we were leaving. He goes, "Jesus, that's you."
Leaving Louder attempting to salvage the situation with a solo conversation with Love. The conclusion to this whole thing is that MTV has an arsenal of awkward interviews. And that's what happens when the interviewer doesn't know anything about the artist he's interviewing, and the person being interviewed doesn't even want to be there. What is your favorite interview insanity? Did you find them funny, or were they cringeworthy? I think some of them really were. If you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you love to gossip about rock stars, or if you are a rock star, this is the place for you. So subscribe. See you in the next video.